Welcome to the new episode of All the Jazz. I'm your host, Matyash, and I have with me Guy Steven Needler. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, welcome to you all, and thanks to Mathias for inviting me again. It's always an honor and a pleasure to work with people who are spreading the word about the greater reality. Thank you.
And happy belated birthday to you.
Yes, for those listeners who were there, I was 61 yesterday, which is an auspicious date. It's still close to 60 though, so not getting closer to 70 yet.
Right. What stage you feel like where you reached that age and you were like, oh, well, now I'm getting that age where I'm older, or there's wisdom more than physical strength.
You know, it's a funny old thing. It's like the ascension process. This happens gradually. So age creeps upon you gradually, wisdom creeps upon you gradually, spiritualism creeps upon you gradually. And basically you sort of absorb it as you go along. And so therefore there isn't like a stepped change where you think, oh, I'm spiritual now, or no, I'm 60 odd now. It sort of gets there. And things like going grey and losing the hair, which don't matter, of course. It's what goes on in your head, in your heart, that matters. But it's really one of these things where it happens so slowly and in a linear way from our perspective that we tend to, for want of a better word, not spot it happening.
Right. Yeah, the hair. I'm kind of resistant to losing hair and kind of covering it up. So, but that's only a phase that one goes through. I think I'll have to make a decision, either like go out or just cut everything and just start anew. Start a new life.
That's a good thing to do. Yeah. I mean, the most important thing is whether you're happy in what you're doing and whether what you're doing feels right. And if that's the case, then you're following the correct path associated with your life plan, which is good.
Is it possible to be spiritual and be unhappy?
Be spiritual and be unhappy? I think it probably is, yes, because unless we understand what we are from a spiritual perspective and what we're heading towards, what we're trying to get to, then we can live in a state of, well, we know we've got to do something, but we don't know what. And that happens quite a lot to people because they don't understand their journey or how they're supposed to be working with their journey. So I think it is possible to be, basically unhappy whilst also being spiritual.
And like, would that mean also that sometimes we have greater challenges? Like, because when you set an intention to be loving, then probably you set forth a number of, like, it's almost like a course. You go on a different course and you're presented with challenges to almost to graduate from that, as it were. Would there be a reality to this?
Yes, I think there would be, in terms of inherently we know what we're supposed to be doing. It's like we have a few tips that we get, or should we say taps on the shoulder, where we feel that we should be doing this, or we should be doing that, or that interests me, or this interests me. And as long as we follow these gut feelings or these sort of heartfelt feelings, that we're on the right track. And even if we are only experiencing them for a moment or a few hours or days or weeks, or we're experiencing them for how long we need to experience them, then we've experienced what we need to experience in this incarnation. It's quite important for us to understand that we need to recognize that we do get help in terms of following our direction. We've not got this what's the word for it? We've not got this we've not got free will for nothing, but we do have a plan. The thing is, although things are supposedly preordained. They're not preordained. The only thing that's preordained is what we've got, what we're supposed to achieve. How we achieve it and how we get there is pretty much up to us.
Oh.
So yeah. So it's something to recognize that we get help to make sure we're on the right path, but we still have to go down that path ourselves. So we still have free will, but we don't have. And actually, we don't actually need to meet all those goals or those things that we said we were going to do in our incarnation. We can always pass them on to the next one, or we can do lots more than we thought we were going to do. It's just that we need to understand that the journey, if the journey means we need to go from New York to San Francisco, as an example,
Yeah.
That's the goal, is to go from New York to San Francisco. How we get there is a free will part. You know, we could fly there, we could walk there, we could go on a motorbike there, we could go on a car there, we could go on trains, buses. You know, we can go halfway and stop for 3 or 4 years. You know, we can do all these different things. How our journeys is the free will part. The life plan aspect, or the goal associated with the life plan, is what we're supposed to be going to. And it involves pretty much everything, really. So if we look at everything we're doing, including what you're doing now, what I'm doing now, it's part of what we wanted to do, or how we wanted to be of service to others.
So it's preordained. So this whole podcast
there's a level of it. Yeah, it's not preordained. It's just that there's a level of free will associated with it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, Sir Winston Churchill said one in his first biography, My Early Life. He said that he thought that free will and predetermination are the same thing. And I've always I'll often bring it up because it's a very interesting concept, because he somehow knew that you know, he had free will, but that he inevitably he would choose something that was in some way or another preordained. So it's very curious that he had this awareness. I think he was quite in a way spiritually aware. He had well, but he was in a different way than Gandhi. He had more of a lion kind of heart of a lion, as it were. Yeah.
I mean, it's understanding this and working with it and not being shy, if that makes any sense. But also not being bullish about it as well. You know, we need to take responsibility for what we're doing, even if it's going down to the shop and getting the morning paper. You know, we need to understand that the whole point of going down to the shop and getting the morning paper is that we educate ourselves in some ways to what's happening in the world. And so the essence of what we're doing is important for us to understand that we do have the potential to stray off that path, but also to excel in that path.
You said morning paper. Is something that you recommend buying paper?
No, not really. No, it's just an example.
Right.
It's just an example, really. That you know, we it's something we do on a regular basis, but you know, that regular basis has a function, doesn't it? So if you think about it from that perspective, you think about it from the function of, you know, we buy the morning paper. We do a number of things. That we have exercise. We speak to certain people on the journey. If we walk there, or we drive there, or we cycle there, or whatever. And you know, and buying the paper actually helps the person who you're buying the paper from. So there's a bit of a symbiotic relationship there as well.
Yeah, like, and everybody we meet, do you think like there's probably certain relationships that when people we meet is like there's a history, perhaps there's a past life history, and so there'll be an immediate like maybe charge to the relationship, and sometimes it's not doesn't reveal itself in the beginning. Sometimes it might be later on about the history of the relationship, and or would that matter? Like, is it like if you meet somebody and you get really tangled with them, you could still get lessons out of them even if you had no previous lifetimes?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the thing is to recognize that we our interactions are you know what they're supposed to be, interactions. They are there to assist us and others
Mm-hmm.
in our evolution, irrespective of which direction we're going into. So in essence, if we can ensure that we, in effect, listen to what's going on in our heart, for example, what gut feelings we've got, then we can make sure that we are in the right place at the right time, experiencing the right things with the right individuals, and that what we experience creates a downstream function that keeps it intact. So this downstream function is, what happens when we work with somebody. That interaction with them assists them in, or works with them in some way that assists them in an interaction with others downstream. And that might be one person, might be two people, might be three people. But then that's fractalized again. So you start to see that our actions have massive downstream implications with other individuals.
Wow. Like butterfly effect kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the modern sort of way of saying it. The wings of a butterfly beating in one country create a hurricane in another country. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a movie about called The Butterfly Effect, if I'm not mistaken. It was pretty interesting. So can I ask a personal question? Because I've been thinking a lot about destiny, and you were talking earlier about predestination and destiny. So right now I'm in university, and I think some of the purpose maybe is to learn self-discipline and stuff like that. But I'm having yeah, this has been last year as well. This is my second year. So last year it was very difficult for me to get myself into the groove. So is the purpose, maybe the purpose of me going is just learning self-discipline, or there's something more perhaps to this?
It's more like motivation. It's more like, making sure that you want to be in the right in the right situation, so to speak, where you've got the ability to recognize your own issues in terms of what distracts you, what gives you cognitive dissonance when you're doing something else rather than what you should be doing. All those things, recognizing the distracting factors and working beyond them, and moving beyond them, and recognizing that sometimes we do have to motivate ourselves or give ourselves a kick up the backside to go in a certain direction, and ensure that we are, for the want of a better word, understanding what these distractions are, how to avoid them,
Right.
or how to, or more importantly, how to stay on track.
Right.
That's important. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big issue for me, because I tend to get sidetracked with stuff and watch this YouTube video and that YouTube video. So they they can be a lot of that. And I think that's a very modern problem, people on their smartphones and stuff like that. It's very easy to distract yourself with stuff. People watch Netflix all day, stuff like that. It's very easy nowadays because it's so much more available than back in the day. You had a newspaper and then you read it and they're like, well, maybe you get a library, you get a book. And that's all you could do.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And all these things are distractions, and it's almost like these are karma. People don't understand karma as being anything other than cause and effect. Well, the cause is distraction or addiction to low frequency thoughts, behaviors, and actions, such as watching things that are stopping us from doing what we're supposed to be doing, which is interacting with others, and that interaction creating the potential for us to evolve. But we get stuck into things like watching television, playing computer games, being involved with sex all the time, or drinking, or drugs, or etc., etc., etc. Wanting to be having material wealth, lots of wanting to own lots of things, wanting to have status. All of these things are addictions to being here. in a low frequency environment. And when we eventually realize that this doesn't actually help us at all, they're nice to have, but they shouldn't govern us as individuals. They should just be there as tools to help others, or they're tools to help us experience what we're supposed to be experiencing in this particular incarnation. Then we start to realize that in essence, what we're doing is creating a condition where we are staying in a loop. That means we have to keep continuing to incarnate. Whereas when we can see what's happening, we can see that everything that we have or desire is controlling us rather than us controlling it. Yeah, I mean, there's an old saying, there's no pockets and shrouds. You can't take what you've got here with you when you go back to the energetic. It doesn't exist. Yeah, it only exists in the gross physical. And then when you
all right, you can't take anything with you on the other side.
Yeah. So once you recognize this, and you start to realize that it's what you do here that counts rather than what you've got, then you can start to work with that and create the evolutionary upward spiral. And
I've heard it. Okay.
Eventually, very quickly, move away from the need to incarnate. So because you'll have mastered the physical.
So that's the highest point, isn't it? Like, and I've heard it put in a different way, where it was like what you have and what you do, and then what you are, which is I guess the spiritual. Is that what you're talking about? But sometimes maybe interactions with other people is important, and it's interesting you say that, because I sometimes self-isolate quite a bit, and do stuff by myself. But then I'm like, maybe I would learn a lot more if I was interacting with other people. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, I mean, you can see how certain people get distracted and go down different routes. They get, even though we're supposed to experience extremes of, for want of a better word, interaction with others. Sometimes sometimes we're priests, sometimes we're gangsters, sometimes we're soldiers, sometimes we're kings. So we have to experience all of these different things in different ways, in different environments, and in different circumstances. And that's what makes us grow, basically. But the thing is, if we're in a situation where we don't really understand that this is transitory, it's a big word, that, isn't it? And that's this being a transitory condition is not what we really are. Then we start to realize again that all these other things don't really matter. We just need to work with what we've got and accept what we are. The thing is that we do start to linearize things, or should we say, create a duality. And people say that we're supposed to be in the physical universe, the gross physical universe, which is the first three frequencies associated with the universe, and there's another sort of 9 above that, create the opportunity for duality. But the duality is only a condition because of our, shall we say, lack of communicative and interactive bandwidth that we normally have. So we see things in ones and zeros, or yeses and nos, or ups and downs, good and bad. And it's the good and bad side that people see as being, I'd rather have a good life or good experiences than bad experiences. But there's no such thing as good or bad. There's just experience. And as long as we recognize this, and we work with it, and we understand that each experience is designed to help us grow, or others around us grow, then we will grow and we'll evolve. And the number of times we come down here to do these different incarnations and experience these different things in different ways will start to get minimized.
What if you there's somebody that that's basically from the outside looking in, they're destroying their life, and they're into alcoholism, gambling, all these different addictions, and then they die? But what does that mean? That lifetime was wasted, or that just means, oh well, he might get another chance and come back and start redoing some of the stuff?
It's never wasted, and maybe that particular experience is what they're supposed to experience. But more often than not, the experience is there to help us move beyond it,
right?
And master it, so to speak. And there's plenty of people, but I know plenty of people who could be classified as the people who have for want of a better word, wasted their lives. But maybe they haven't. Maybe they've just experienced it in a different way compared to what we've experienced. Maybe they're supposed to experience that. Or maybe they're learning from this particular experience of not doing what they're supposed to have done, and it'll benefit them in a more powerful way in the next incarnation.
Oh yeah, they'll have this strong sense. I don't want to waste time, or I want to do something different. Then they'll have they'll have an aversion to wasting time, which I guess is good.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to get into, I don't know if we talked about it. We might have touched upon it a little bit, but I think it still has ramifications on our culture. And if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. So the last presidential election, there was a lot of controversy.
Mhm.
And as I think there was some fraud in the election. And this is not just in US, by the way. Some other countries, they're more obvious fraud, perhaps, like third world countries and African countries where the elections are sometimes obviously rigged. But what implications would it have, or does it have, if a Western country is starting to do that? In my view, I don't know. I could be wrong.
Um, some of them are supposedly rigged. I don't feel that any of them are as clean as they should be or could be. That's a better way of saying it. In terms of any American elections, the elections that you've experienced in the last sort of 5 or 10 years have been, in essence, there to help us all. And we've experienced similar things in the UK, and so they have in New Zealand, and so they have in France recently, although it failed, and so we have in Australia. Is that if we are lazy and we don't take responsibility for ensuring that the individuals who we elect to be our governors and our leaders are not actually of that correct that level of quality that they should be, then what we get is nonsense. What we get is people who pander to the less experienced souls, those who are still within the karmic cycle, or embedded in the karmic cycle and embedded in their incarnations, to the point where they don't see beyond what's in front of them. They don't see beyond the bigger, they don't see the bigger picture at all. They just see themselves as being the human body, and what can they do to better themselves in terms of their own financial and materialistic state of beingness,
Right.
which is not what it's all about. So when we see what's going on there around the world, and we've got another one in Russia as well happening right now, is that we're starting to see how, when we take our eye off the ball and we fail to see what's happening in terms of what these potential leaders, all these leaders can do if they're re-elected, then we start to realize that we need to be more aware of who these individuals are that we put into power. And actually, if we get a situation where we go through an election process and the individuals that are left actually aren't any good, and although we're supposed to say we've got to choose one or the other, but actually they're both rubbish, then actually we should as individuals, or as the so-called electorate, have the power to say, actually, no, we don't want either of these two. Let's do it again. Because the quality of the individuals we're seeing now is not what we want to have governing us and leading us into a state of mature civilization.
But what if the election would have gone the other way, though? And then the people can say, well, I don't know if, because sometimes I think, like, does it make a difference if somebody's aware, like their vote counts as one, and if there's fraud, it's not even that, it all counts as zero if their ballot is cast out, So it's a crazy state. I've seen some people online say, well, I checked my vote, I voted in the election, and this is in US, And then I checked online and it said I didn't vote. And then they're like, oh, I lost all hope. I'm not going to waste my time with elections anymore. It's very strange time.
I mean, how can you check online to say whether you voted or not?
Apparently, there's ways to check if to see if you voted or not.
Well,
but
I'm
this
not
is in
aware.
US.
I'm not aware of that being available at all, because that means that there's ways to change it totally. My understanding is that it would be just too difficult to do that sort of level of manipulation, because if that level of manipulation is there, then they don't need anybody to vote. You could go there with your ballot paper, put your X on the spot, put it in there, and then it goes down to the local incinerator.
Yeah, well, that's what some say happened, so I don't know. It kind of makes me a bit cynical about the whole thing, when you I think
my understanding is that we have to use our heart and not fall into the trap of conspiracy theory, because there's a lot of people who are swayed one way or another based upon misinformation, but that misinformation contains enough correct information to make it plausible and to attract the attention of those who would like to think in that particular way, the misinformation way. So we have to look at it and start to say, well, actually, is this nonsense? Where's this come from? Who's saying this? And you'll start, if you look even further, you start to dig down to the origin point of where this information has come from. You'll find it is somebody who's trying to change the way we're thinking, or in this instance, change the way we're voting. So we have to go with what our heart says. We have to use our intuition, our gut feeling, to understand what's true information and what is quite clearly just nonsense.
Okay, this brings me to an interesting phenomenon, because I've known many healers and stuff like that, and it's interesting that some of them are on the political spectrum very left, and some of them are on the right. So but how can it be if they're both let's say they're all let's say comparing two different Reiki teachers, and let's just assume they have solid intuition, or so they say, and both of them have a very different experience of the world. One thinks, so Biden, this guy is amazing. Another person thinks their intuition tells them this was a stolen election. It's a very curious phenomenon. How can it be the intuition of one person, or maybe they're both wrong in some way, but it's a very interesting phenomenon nonetheless. How can it be? That's a very tough question, isn't it?
My personal thought process is that if you're truly spiritual, then you shouldn't have any other political bias other than telling the truth and leading people to enlightenment. Simple as that.
Right.
So if you have people who are far right or far left, then they're not really being spiritual, are they? They're just using it as a medium to voice their views or control others.
Okay, let's take a different example then. What if somebody's center left and somebody's center right? They both have intuition. They're both striving for the truth, but they're seeing different things. Because I've seen this well, maybe I'm not seeing. I've often seen it in the far left parlance. That they intuit something that anyway. It's all very confusing to me, and I'm still grappling with this phenomena that occurs.
Yeah, again, I think that if they truly are spiritual, then they shouldn't be, they should be neutral. Is the best way to do it, the best way to say it. Apart from their own belief system in terms of how they're going to present their knowledge to others. That's the only thing that they shouldn't be neutral in, because their own understanding of how to get towards self-awareness or enlightenment or self-realization, provided they're speaking from personal experience and not just being an orator, that's the only thing that should be absolutely down the line on. Everything else should be neutralized. Okay, that's somebody else's reality. My reality is this. That's somebody else's reality. My reality is this. Political things don't don't affect me, to be honest. It's happening around me, not to me.
Right. So perhaps the spiritual realities is people are, the intuition is tainted by bias, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah. It's without doubt a condition where we, you know, we need to make sure we aren't biased in that particular way, because that creates again an attractive force, an addiction to thinking, behaving, and acting in a certain way.
Well, then, because I see myself as striving for truth, and I guess I have so you're the opinion then that there was no fraud in the election, if I'm getting that correctly, to sum it up.
No, no. There was only an individual who was immature in a position of leadership and was behaving with immaturity. As simple as that. And the thing is that when we have people who, with all things, yeah, we leaders are not just politicians. They're football stars, they're pop stars, they're artists, they're sort of scientists, and all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
When we see these individuals sort of lose the plot a bit and start to believe the rhetoric that their followers or their devotees give them, they put them on a pedestal, and they see themselves as being this individual, then they start to try to manipulate those individuals who put them there in the first place. So the idea is that you should stay humble, do everything with humility, because that's the only way you can keep stable when people put you on a pedestal.
Right.
It's and this is what happens with these leaders. They've put on a pedestal and think, right, I'm here now, I can do whatever I want to, and then all of a sudden they find that they do it and they get away with it, and then they do it again and they get away with it again, and then they start to believe that they can do it and they can do anything they want to because nobody's going to stop them. And this has happened all over the world with leadership. The UK is experiencing it, the US experienced it, New Zealand's experiencing it still, Australia's experiencing it, Russia's definitely experiencing it, and so is China. So
New Zealand has experienced it. I'm not aware what happened in New Zealand.
Well, they're still experiencing it. Their political leader, their prime minister, has played upon the, what's the word for it? The way that the population thinks.
Oh, about the COVID especially, right?
Well, everything, everything.
Okay.
And it's only now that you're starting to see, or we're starting to see, that these are what you call fair weather leaders. They can get into power because they say the right things and make promises, and the people who are not so intelligent, if you want to call it that, or don't see beyond the words. You look at the actions, not the words. So that's the way you should look at all things from a potential leader. Look at the actions, not the words.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they have to do some real leadership, because usually these people are in power and the countries look after themselves. Everything works because it's always worked. As soon as they start to change things, it makes a mess of it.
Right.
So you start to realize that these people actually aren't leaders. They shouldn't be there, but we've put them there because we've not had the thought process to consider that what they're saying can't potentially happen at all.
Right. It's very hard to distinguish rhetoric from what's true, because most politicians just say what you want to hear, what they think the populace wants to hear. And but I personally think Trump did exactly what he said he was going to do, which is kind of rare. He started building the wall. He there was no wars under his no new wars and stuff. The economy was doing well up until the the controversial COVID thing. So in my view, he did better than I expected, actually.
With some things you should, well, there's one of the positive things with people like this is it shakes things up a little bit.
Yeah.
And it takes you out of the standard groove, which can also be wrong as well. But the other side is that is that in shaking things up, it should be a catalyst for us to understand the bigger picture, what's going on around us, and not just go into another groove. That makes sense. We should be starting to see things in a clearer picture, because when you start to see things that aren't working right, or things that aren't clearly are wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but they're being broadcast as being right, you know, we then need to start to realize that these people in power shouldn't really be there, because they're not helping us evolve. They're keeping us in a certain level.
Right. I suppose.
They're keeping us in a level of unawareness.
Right.
And that in itself is a crime.
Hey, I think Biden is doing terrible. Like the Afghanistan war, the the terrorists came back right back in after 19 years of fighting. Anyway, but I think maybe there's a purpose to all of this. Like you said before, on a personal level, if there's tragedy that happens, there could be some good that come out of it, I suppose. Isn't it?
Yeah, and it's all to do with recognizing that we have the collective power,
right,
or authority to change our direction, but we have to make sure that those we put in place that to lead us in that changing direction are capable of actually doing it, and not just enjoying the ride.
Yeah, so that brings us, if you want to talk about the other hot topic, well, it used to be more the COVID and the mask mandates and the vaccines and everything. Now they're starting to die down kind of quickly, which is really surprising. Once the government stopped control of it, in a lot of countries, I think in UK was March or April-ish, it stopped the rains, and all of a sudden there was less cases, less reporting on it. It's very interesting. Well, what's your thought on all of this?
Well, my thoughts are that we do all the right things in the wrong way. You know, you don't need to be a high level manager or a chief executive officer to realize that the whole thing was governed incorrectly. There was a serious set of protocol that was that was broadcast and agreed to worldwide by all the countries associated with the World Health Authority for dealing with potentially dangerous pandemics. And some countries followed it, some countries didn't, some countries made a mess of it, you know, and that none of them really followed it at all. I mean, the idea of having pop-up hospitals was brilliant. You know, isolate the people who've got it, keep them away from the standard health system.
Mm-hmm.
Rotate the doctors and nurses so that you're not overloading them virally for a starter, but we're not overworking them and burning them out.
Right. Yeah,
they
that's
get
too
back
much.
so they have a quarantine period, they're okay, then they get back into the standard stuff, and somebody else has a go. So all these pop-up hospitals we had here did never get used at all, which is a millions, probably billions of pounds were spent.
Wow. So they made it available, but they were didn't
never used it properly now.
Well,
And so we've got scientists work on absolutes and absolute data. And when you're at the cutting edge of technology, for example, whether it's medical science or electronic science or another form of technical science, if you're presenting something to somebody, you need to to get it, you're putting a paper forward for publication, to justify your research and to get more funding in, more grants in. Then the information you give has got to be rock solid, absolutely rock solid. These same people were allowing, or whether they were told they couldn't affect it, I don't know, were allowing incorrect data to be broadcast
right.
on a daily basis, saying that we've had X number of thousand or people die with COVID-19. when actually they died of a heart attack.
Right.
They got COVID-19 is incorrect reporting. It should have been real deaths associated with, you know, their bodily functions not being able to cope with the overload associated with the COVID-19 virus. Absolutely. I mean, we can die at 96, but we've had cancer for 3 or 4 years.
Right. And
it might be that our livers failed, nothing to do with lung cancer, which we might have, you know. So the accuracy of the reporting was incorrect.
right.
And so it was again another way to understand how these individuals around the world weren't actually properly in control and actually were lying to the general public, which is a shame. Because
Well, WHO was World Health Organization had something to do with that, I think, as well. So that's I don't know. That to me produces skepticism of that.
Well, I suspect that there may have been a function of scaremongering,
Yes.
to try to control the population. Because at the end of the day, if it was a real problem, half the population of the earth would be dead by now, at least.
Yeah. And how many died? Maybe
I mean, look at it. I mean,
less than 1%.
Yeah, I'm just showing facts now. Back in the days of the bubonic plague, the Black Death, we had a world population of 750 million. Okay, we didn't have instantaneous transportation like planes, cars, trains, buses. We didn't have massively densely populated cities. We didn't have people moving from city to city, from world to world, to country, you know, in the space of, you know, a few hours. We had none of that. And yet within 18 months, a third of the population was dead.
Wow.
Another 4 years, and it started to burn out then. The rest of the population who were going to die had died. And so the half of the population of the earth had died.
Wow.
In 4 years. Yeah, that's a real
That's a real
virus.
problem. That's a real problem.
Yeah? The way we move around the planet, if we got something that was really that bad, we're probably looking at perhaps even 70% of the population dead by now. Could we have been?
Yeah, that's billions. You know, that would be like
4 billion. Yeah.
4 billion people.
Well,
wow.
7.8 billion people is the current population of the planet.
Wow. Yeah.
We've increased 5-fold since World War I. So you can understand how, you know, the correct management of something like a really serious virus needs to be done properly. And, you know, it's quite obvious that when the figures of COVID were not even equaling the worst case average for the combined deaths worldwide of flu and pneumonia over a 12-month period, you start to sort of question a few things, really, what's going on.
And then there's a whole issue of the vaccine, and then there's reports now.
Yeah, the vaccine's fine. Nothing wrong with the vaccines.
But there was a report I saw that came out later that they covered up. There was some fatalities. We're testing
there's fatalities with aspirin. There's fatalities with paracetamol. You know, there's always going to be somebody.
With aspirin, there's fatalities.
Yeah. You can get anaphylactic shock and die from it. No problem. Yeah.
But that's like I don't know. I got the impression that the number was like out of 45K that 1,000 died or something. That's a lot more than aspirin.
I don't know what the
the figures are. Maybe I don't have the right figures.
But the thing is to understand is there's always going to be somebody who's allergic to a cocktail of drugs in some way out there.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always somebody that's outside of the standard distribution curve, and therefore is affected by it. You know, I remember years ago there was a chap who owned a diving equipment company. He was a very, very well respected and very well experienced diver, and he was diving within the tables, which are decompression tables based upon length of time at certain depths, and he was well within the tables. Ended up with a bend that almost killed him.
Oh wow!
So and they couldn't understand it. Why did you get a bend when he was well within the tables? People's physiology is different, and although the norm not most people survive things. You're going to get people drop off the side when they're outside on the slope of the standard distribution curve. That's life. Certain genome are more susceptible to certain viruses and diseases than other genome.
Right.
Look at the Afro-Caribbean genome. It has problems with heart attacks. There's problems with issues with prostate cancer, those sorts of things. And even with COVID-19, they were more susceptible because of their genome. It doesn't make them second-rate citizens. It's just that in this particular instance, they got a higher percentage chance of having a problem than we do. There may be a virus in the future where they're totally immune, but we all conk out.
Right. I think the basic issue for me was, and the reason I didn't take it was the hasty development of it. So that I think what you said about the outliers, they didn't really, the studies that they did couldn't have foreseen the outliers and how much people could have reacted badly to it.
Clinical tests are only a percentage of the population. The thousands upon thousands of people who take part in clinical tests are only a
fraction,
certain percentage of the population. You're always going to get people who are outside of that estimate of how the body's going to react with a certain chemical. I do have to say though, I mean, when you look at the amount of work that happened so quickly worldwide, you start to realize that some of these things are there for a reason. Some of these things, like the virus, is there for a reason. Climate change is there for a reason. The war in Ukraine is there for a reason. It's for us to realize what's right and what's wrong, and collectively work together to put things right.
So what do you think about the war in Ukraine? What's the I don't really know what to think of it. It's a messy situation.
Well, certainly there's one particular individual who's testing us all.
Mr. Putin.
He's threatening to push the button, isn't it? But at the end of the day, it's up to the rest of the world to realize that sometimes you have to cut a cancer out to let the rest of the body survive. Sometimes you have to amputate an arm or a leg to stop the gangrene spreading.
Okay, what does this mean? What does this mean in this context?
What it means is that we collectively have to work together to ignore the threats. We don't need to be aggressive. We just need to stop the communication, stop the commerce, and also try in some way to educate those individuals who are being fed misinformation, the right information. Give them the possibility of getting the avenues available to them so they can find the right information. Not offering alternative misinformation, but just finding ways to educate them, or give them the opportunity to educate themselves.
Right.
And really, we're starting to understand as a race that we don't want war. We don't want any more atrocities. We don't want to have to rebuild cities and rebuild countries, and bury people who've died in horrific ways, because we're more advanced. We're not medieval anymore. We don't hang, draw, and quarter anybody. Well, at least not that I know of, anyway.
We don't hang people anymore. Yeah.
We don't hang people anymore. Maybe we give them an injection sometimes. Give them enough electricity to blow them apart. But none of this stuff should be, a sort of thought processes. We should be thinking about presenting ourselves to maybe other civilizations in a way which makes those other civilizations want us to be part of them. And right now we're in such a state of confusion and lack of leadership, lack of direction, and lack of collective understanding that we just, as a race, as an incarnate race of individuals who are capable of communicating in a mature way with other incarnate races, we're just not there yet. We can't even work together collectively now. We've got people who have got a Chinese genome, Afro-Caribbean genome, American Indian genome, sort of Indian for Asian Indian genome, you know, and we see them and we discriminate in certain different ways. The thing
Right.
is, we're all souls. We're all energetic entities with
For sure.
sentience and energy. The human body is just a vehicle that we use to experience, learn, and evolve. It's like a car. You know, we buy a car, we use the car. When it dies, we take it to the scrap metal merchant and have it recycled, and we buy a new one, or if we can do. But the thing is, we when we start to realize this, then the color of the skin, you know, means nothing. The culture is something we should absorb and understand and work with, and working together as one race is the most important thing we can do. Not try to sort of segment each other
Yeah.
or start to leave groups of people like Brexit, the UK leaving Brexit, complete nonsense. We should be thinking about working together as an Earth-based civilization.
I don't know about that because I don't know, like, because it's a top-down. Sometimes bureaucrats, let's just say, sometimes bureaucrats are not the right people to control everything, and that's my view. But we'll have a gentleman's disagreement. I love that term. I want to popularize that term, gentleman's disagreement. I want to quickly touch upon last time I asked you on how do you think mankind is doing. Like, I know a lot of things are happening, like in the past 2 years, COVID and all that, and now the Ukraine war, and the recent thing was the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial and all the craziness that is going on from there. And you see that famous people are just regular people and just as crazy, if not more. So how are we doing? How do you think?
Right now we're bouncing along the bottom.
On the bottom.
Yeah, we are in general, we're ascending the frequencies and we are evolving. We are, but we don't go through a a flat upward rising curve or gradually increasing curve. We go through a sawtooth profile, and some of those sawtooth are big profiles, yeah. And right now we're at the bottom of a big one.
Okay, so now we're at the bottom.
So
okay.
With some point we're going to all sort of start to think, this is nonsense. Let's start working together properly to experience, what it's like to be a higher frequency. When we're a higher frequency, we start to understand things better. We start to see things clearly. We start to recognize that who and what we are. We were going towards that towards the end of 2010, 2011, 2012. And then the so-called
things
ascension.
became
The so-called
worse.
ascension didn't happen because we were already ascending individually anyway. But the people were expecting this like cliff edge change where we go from being, standard human beings into being supermen or enlightened beings. It happens gradually over time with us all.
Right, it's a slow process.
And so a lot of people sort of rejected spiritualism totally. When people who are espousing this knife edge or cliff edge change sort of lost credibility, and others used it as an example of why spiritualism is complete nonsense. It's not. It's just I need to understand how the human being works.
Do you think when you said before other civilizations, did you mean like kind of like UFOs, aliens are gonna?
We call them UFOs. We call the vehicles they travel around the local galaxy and other galaxies UFOs. There's various different types, from the mechanical to the energetic, to entities that actually aren't incarnate at all, and just drop down the frequencies to visit and see what's going on. If you look at the billions of galaxies in the physical universe, including those that we can't see because we can't see beyond certain frequency levels, so the universe is actually very full, not mostly empty. Then you start to realize that there's lots of opportunity to experience and evolve, and we all incarnate in different bodies, not just different bodies on Earth, but different bodies in different parts of the physical universe.
Do you have a prediction? Do you have a prediction about when we'll make the first encounter of third kind? Is it?
They're
Oh,
already
they're
here.
here?
They're already
Oh,
here. They're already here, and some people have seen them clearly. That these are, the various different encounters that the people have seen. But mostly, when they're working, there's a higher frequency. Most of them are a higher frequency, and so they're outside of our visual range.
oh,
Okay.
because I
And the
can't
only
see them. I can't see them.
no, well, I can perceive them
Oh,
if I switch my level of perception now. I can see that there's lots of activity, what you will call craft in the sky, that we can't see. It's just that when we start to work on ourselves and evolve properly whilst incarnate, then our frequency levels increase, and then we're able to start to see or perceive that which is in the next frequency up. Then we'll start to see more.
can I ask? I didn't know if I was gonna do this, but how's Daniel doing? How's Daniel?
He's doing as well as he should do in his own way.
Very well, very well.
Everybody's doing the best they can given the tools they've got to work with the challenges of the experiences, the individuals and the circumstances and the environment that they're in.
Oh, so last thing, what's the best thing? What's a best spiritual practice that one can do that pick up to start ascending the levels, as it were?
Meditate.
Meditate.
Make it the first thing that you do every morning. Make it as important as going to the bathroom when you wake up in the morning.
Does it matter what kind of meditation, or just pick up anything that works for you?
There are a number of different sort of fast track meditation processes. One of my own works really, really well. It's called Traversing the Frequencies. Kriya Yoga works really, really well. And the Hong Saw technique, which is another form of focused meditation, works well. That's the Self-Realization Fellowship teach that, which is very, very good. But just meditating and clearing the mind and allowing yourself to just be is a very good way, because it detaches you from the physical and allows you to be more receptive to the other aspects of the environment that we're in, not just the physical universe, or I should say the gross physical universe, which is the first sort of the lowest frequencies associated with the physical universe, but the high frequencies as well, and those frequencies that create other universes in the rest of the multiverse environment we're part of. Just meditate, clear the mind. Don't do a shopping list while you're meditating. What I've got to do today,
Right.
Oops, got to go and feed the cat. I've got to go and buy some potatoes from the store down the road. That's not meditating. Meditating, right. Just being. Concentrate on the breathing as well. That makes a difference.
By the way, I love the graphics that you have in the background. Very, very cool.
Yeah, it's the Aurora Borealis, the Northern Lights. We went to Norway towards the end of last year to see them, and actually that they don't look this color to the naked eye. By the way, this is what happens when they're captured on film,
right,
or digital media. They look more like clouds moving backwards and forwards, like a grey color rather than a green color. It's only when you record it they start to look green.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you very much. I think we're out of time. Thank you very much, guys, Stephen Needler, for being on the podcast and sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, it's the best I can give, and hopefully unbiased as well. It's basically observational and from the heart as well.
Awesome.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening or watching the podcast.